The envelope looked harmless. Thin paper. Neutral font. The familiar HOA logo printed in dull ink. It arrived like hundreds before it, slipped quietly into the mailbox, carrying the illusion of routine. But what it contained would fracture an entire neighborhood and expose just how dangerous a little power could become in the wrong hands. The notice announced a mandatory HOA fee adjustment, effective immediately. No warning. No meeting. No vote. Just a cold statement declaring the new amount already overdue. At the bottom, buried beneath polite legal language, was a line that changed everything. Failure to comply would authorize immediate enforcement actions. That was the first shock. The homeowner had lived in the community for years without a single issue. Every payment had been made on time. Every rule followed. The house was clean, maintained, and invisible in the best possible way. This was a place where nothing dramatic ever happened, and that was exactly how everyone preferred it. Until Karen arrived, she hadn't always been on the HOA board. When she first moved in, she was just another neighbor. Quiet at first. Observant. Always watching. Then she volunteered for the board, and everything shifted. Rules that had been ignored for years suddenly mattered. Warnings started appearing on doors. Friendly reminders transformed into formal notices. Karen didn't knock. She didn't talk. She documented. She walked the neighborhood daily with a clipboard, her eyes scanning lawns as if she were hunting for mistakes. She knew the bylaws better than anyone, not because she respected them, but because she knew exactly how to weaponize them. The fee was her idea. Everyone knew it, even if no one dared say it out loud. The homeowner didn't refuse to pay. Not at first. A simple clarification request was submitted, asking why the fee had been applied retroactively and why no vote had been held. It was a reasonable question. The response came back within hours. IT didn't answer anything. Instead, it repeated policy language, cited meetings that never happened, and ended with a warning that continued delay would be treated as non-compliance. The tone wasn't administrative. It was personal. That same night, the first violation notice appeared. IT accused the homeowner of leaving trash cans visible past approved hours. The problem was simple. The cans hadn't been outside at all. The homeowner checked the timestamp. The notice had been filed while they were still at work. The next morning brought another violation. Lawn edging. Then another. Exterior appearance. Then one more for failure to correct prior violations, even though the prior ones were false. By the end of the week, fines had begun stacking up, and the homeowner complied anyway. Photos were taken. Corrections were made. Proof was uploaded. None of it mattered. Each resolved issue was immediately replaced with a new accusation. The HOA portal filled with red warnings and escalating penalties. Then Karen started showing up. She stood just outside the property line, phone raised, pretending to scroll while clearly taking photos. Sometimes she came early in the morning. Sometimes late in the evening. She never crossed the line. Never touched anything. But her presence was suffocating. The feeling of being watched settled deep and refused to leave, and neighbors noticed. Whispers followed her down the street. Everyone had their own Karen story, but this was different. This wasn't petty enforcement. This was targeted pressure. The HOA fee remained unpaid. That was when the tone changed completely. A formal enforcement notice arrived, stating the HOA reserved the right to conduct corrective actions on the homeowner's behalf and bill the costs directly. The language was vague but dangerous. It gave them permission to enter the property. Security cameras were installed that same day. They paid for themselves immediately. At 2:14 a.m., motion alerts triggered. The footage showed a figure stepping onto the lawn. At 2:16, another followed, dragging something heavy. The faces weren't clear, but the actions were deliberate, careful, calculated. By morning, tire tracks scarred the grass. A sprinkler head was shattered, flooding the yard. The damage was obvious and undeniable. At 7:02 a.m., before the homeowner had even woken up, a new HOA violation was filed. Lawn damage. Water misuse. Immediate fines applied. Karen had reported it. The realization hit hard and fast. The violations weren't random. They weren't exaggerated. They were being created. Sleep became impossible. Every noise outside felt intentional. Every notification triggered dread. The house stopped feeling safe. It felt monitored. Hunted. Still, the homeowner refused to pay. That refusal pushed Karen past restraint. A landscaping crew arrived without notice in the middle of the day. They tore out plants, dug up soil, and removed decorative features that had been there for years. Karen stood nearby, arms crossed, watching. She never touched anything. She didn't have to. By evening, the yard was destroyed. By morning, the bill arrived. The amount was staggering. The justification meaningless. The deadline immediate. When the homeowner reviewed the footage, the truth was undeniable. Karen had directed every move. She had pointed, supervised, and documented the damage as corrections. The HOA portal updated with fresh violations based on the destruction she had ordered. This wasn't enforcement anymore. It was sabotage disguised as authority. The homeowner sat alone that night, surrounded by screens filled with evidence, the original HOA letter lying on the table like a loaded weapon. The fee that started it all was still unpaid, but it had already cost peace, safety, and trust. Karen believed she had absolute control. She didn't realize that every step she took was being recorded, cataloged, and preserved. She thought fear would force compliance. Instead, she was building a case against herself. Outside, porch lights flicked on across the neighborhood. Curtains shifted. People were watching now, not just Karen. The war she had started with a single fee was no longer quiet, and it was only just beginning. Karen's biggest mistake wasn't the sabotage. It was believing she could stop the moment the landscaping was destroyed and billed as a correction. Something irreversible happened. The conflict crossed a line that could never be walked back. This was no longer an HOA dispute. It was a coordinated abuse of authority, and the evidence was no longer scattered. It was complete. The homeowner didn't respond to the bill.no emails, .no appeals, .no angry messages. Silence replaced compliance, and that silence made Karen reckless. Within days, enforcement accelerated. New violations appeared every morning like clockwork. Fence alignment, soil displacement, unauthorized exterior changes. The language grew harsher, deadlines grew shorter, and penalties became steeper. Each notice referenced the unpaid fee, now framed as intentional defiance rather than a question charge. The HOA began behaving like a debt collector with unchecked power. Then came the fence, without warning or consent. A temporary boundary fence was installed directly through the homeowner's yard. It cut across garden beds, crushed irrigation lines, and blocked access to part of the property. The HOA labeled it a boundary clarification measure. Despite the property line being clearly documented for years, Karen supervised from a distance. She never held tools, never touched the fence. She stood back, pointing and watching, ensuring every step caused maximum disruption. By the end of the day, the yard looked less like a home and more like a construction site. The bill arrived before sunset. It was the largest one yet. This time, the homeowner barely looked at it. The focus had shifted. Every camera angle was reviewed. Every clip was labeled. Timelines were built, minute by minute. The pattern was undeniable now. Damage only occurred after Karen's visits. Violations only appeared when she was involved. Reports were filed with suspicious speed, often within minutes of the incidents themselves. The system wasn't broken. It was being exploited. Neighbors began reaching out quietly. One by one, they shared their own stories. Fees they had paid without understanding why. Fines that appeared without warning. Pressure that disappeared only after compliance. Some had security footage. Some had emails saved. Some had nothing but memories of fear and frustration. Together, it formed a map. Karen wasn't enforcing rules equally, she was targeting resistance. Footage from across the street filled critical gaps. A doorbell camera captured Karen entering the homeowner's property late at night, moving objects into violation positions, then photographing them. Another clip showed her instructing workers while deliberately staying off camera as much as possible. She believed proximity without touch meant innocence. She was wrong. The homeowner compiled everything into a single, devastating record. No emotion. No commentary. Just evidence. Dates. Times. Actions. Financial inconsistencies. Selective enforcement. Unauthorized entry. Property damage to IT was submitted to an external regulatory authority that oversaw HOAs. The response was immediate. Formal requests went out demanding HOA records. Financial statements. Meeting minutes. Voting logs. Enforcement histories. Karen's name appeared everywhere. Motions passed without quorum. Fee increases approved without homeowner notification. Enforcement actions clustered around a small group of residents who had dared to question her authority. The HOA board began to unravel. Members resigned suddenly, claiming ignorance. Others attempted to distance themselves. Emergency meetings were scheduled, then abruptly canceled. Notices were retracted, then quietly replaced with softer language. Karen tried to regain control. She sent new violation notices, but the confidence was gone. Inspections stopped entirely. Her daily patrols vanished. The clipboard disappeared. The woman who once stalked the streets with authority retreated indoors. Then the lien notice arrived. IT was meant to be the final blow. Filed improperly and missing required disclosures, it triggered deeper legal scrutiny. What was supposed to terrify the homeowner instead became undeniable proof of misconduct. The HOA was forced to freeze all enforcement actions pending investigation. The balance of power shifted overnight. A private community meeting was held days later. There were no speeches. No arguments. No accusations. Screens played footage on a loop. Karen directing destruction. Karen creating violations. Karen documenting damage she had caused. The room was silent. No one defended her. Karen was removed from the HOA board within days. The fee increase was declared invalid. All fines tied to her enforcement were voided. Refunds were issued quietly, almost desperately, as if money could erase what had been revealed. Karen didn't fight back. She vanished. Her house went on the market less than a month later. The listing was carefully neutral, professionally staged, and aggressively priced. On moving day, no one came outside. No one waved. No one offered help. The neighborhood changed after the HOA rules were rewritten. Transparency became mandatory. Inspections required multiple approvals. Financial changes demanded community votes. The system Karen had exploited was dismantled piece by piece. The homeowner's yard took months to recover. The fence was removed. The garden replanted. The lawn slowly healed. Trust took longer. Even after Karen was gone, the feeling of being watched lingered. One evening, long after the investigations ended, the homeowner stood quietly on the porch. The original HOA letter still existed, folded and worn. A reminder of how something so small had nearly cost everything. The fee had broken more than patience. IT had exposed a predator hiding behind rules and, in doing so, saved an entire neighborhood from becoming her next target. Power had turned into proof, and proof had ended the war.